Hi everyone, welcome to tonight's Bee Biosecurity online talk. My name is Rebecca, I'm the Bee Biosecurity Officer for Queensland. Just a couple of quick announcements before we get started tonight. This is talk number 2 in series 4. We've got 2 more talks coming up. The next one is a little out of kilter because I am going to be away the very first Tuesday of the month for July. So we're going to be having it on the second Tuesday of the month. And then we've got one in August as well. So keep those in mind and I'll make sure that we send out those reminders to everyone as well. Another thing that's coming up, very exciting, is this week is the Queensland Beekeepers Conference. That's down on the Gold Coast, and on the Saturday is a bit more of an open day, a field day, and I'm going to be there talking to anybody who comes along. So if you do want to catch up, that's going to be a really, really exciting event. Now tonight we've got a excellent speaker. We've got Rod Bourke, who is the Bee Biosecurity Officer for New South Wales, and he's going to be talking about a really important subject for beekeepers, whether they've got just a few hives or a lot of hives, and that is barrier systems. Barrier systems are essential to making sure that you are minimising your risk of spreading pests and disease, and it really makes your whole beekeeping a far more profitable and effective endeavour. And so I will throw it now right over to you, Rod.
Thank you very much. All right, so let's bring this up. I hope everyone can hear me okay. So yeah, I'll be talking about barrier systems, which is the best way to eliminate AFB and manage your beekeeping or make your beekeeping more profitable, which for many is very important. So first we'll start with the simple facts, and they are that bees have wings. Bees can fly wherever they want, just like all teenagers would like to do. Bees often get attracted to exposed honey. Many beekeepers, very unfortunately, leave honey exposed in many different ways, and robber bees consume this treasure trove. You know, they love the stuff. It's the biggest treasure they can find. So managed, neglected, unmanaged and feral colonies may succumb to AFB or other issues, and their honey stores can then become available to robber bees. So a few examples of some of the poor beekeeping that your bees may visit, even though you have no idea at all that they're going there. So you can see here it's pretty bad, just as bad, and we've got AFB, we've got stuff left out, we've got honey on the ground, we've got weak bees, you know, you've got colonies there that cannot protect themselves, stuff that's been robbed out, and you've got the stuff where you've got exposed honey and rubbish junk equipment that beekeepers continue to use for some reason. You know, even boxes of honey left out there so the bees can actually get into this stuff. And it's, you know, bees can't protect all of this stuff. So there's a lot of stuff out there that your bees could be getting into. So basically, anybody can get AFB. Doesn't matter how good a beekeeper you are, you can do everything right, but unfortunately your bees could bring back AFB. So you will get AFB at some stage, and especially if you have strong hives that can fly further and steal more honey. So you're a good beekeeper, you make better bees, and they could end up being the ones that go down. Therefore, it's better for your operation to already be organised and prepared to stop AFB when you do get it. Emphasising when you do get it. Frequent brood checks, which is on all of your hives, not just some, not just the weak ones, also the strong ones, are our best way of picking up an active AFB infection. But you really got to remember that affected hives can still appear clear of AFB, but may have already reached the stage of being infectious if their equipment was moved onto another hive, which many of us are guilty of. I've done it heaps. I've been lucky, but I've done it many, many times. And I bet you guys have too. So simply doing a brood check before taking off honey even, you know, for commercial guys, if you even had the time during a honey flow to do it, cannot stop the spread of AFB when boxes go elsewhere. There are times to do brood checks and times to pull honey, and they are often not at the same time. And as AFB spores are microscopic, so on clean looking gear, they can be right in front of you and you still won't see them. A bit like Varroa, actually. Varroa, just a quick step off. Varroa can be right there in front of you and you won't see them. So just chuck in there that you should be doing your Varroa mite inspections, looking for stuff. So don't just think because your bees look good, there's nothing there. So minimising AFB, we're going to look at brood combs. Regularly replace old brood combs as their prior history makes them a major risk for your operation. They are not a family heirloom, so please don't keep them. A brood comb has well and truly paid for itself within the first season, so by 3 or 4 years they can definitely be disposed of without any hesitation whatsoever. So don't be stingy, don't hold on to them, get rid of them. They're a big risk for you. AFB spores can rest in capped honey for many years within a hive and not cause AFB. So it can all look good, but when those bees consume it and feed it to their young larvae, you get AFB. And of course, it often occurs in the spring build-up, which then derails your entire program and messes with both your head and your sleep because something went wrong that you weren't planning on. So with those old brood combs, extract the honey and then burn or radiate them if they're even worth keeping, and then reinvest the returns from that dangerous old honey, emphasising dangerous old honey with a lot of baggage and a lot of history. Put that in new combs, which often offer a clean environment and 2 to 3 times the area for queens to lay out with brood in spring. Now, you don't realise it. When you look at an old brood comb, there's not much space for bees to use easily. Sure, they can pull out all that old honey, but they've got to do something with it. It's work. So in spring, when they're just hot to trot, give them new stuff. Get rid of that old stuff, give them new stuff, because that also fits in with their swarm management too. You can stop bees from swarming by giving them lots and lots of space to lay out in the brood box, and they'll stay. So it's up to you, your skill as a beekeeper at the right time of the season, stop your bees going or let them go because you didn't do the right thing. So it's a bet both ways there. So your ongoing management for minimising AFB. Destroy any colony which shows clinical AFB symptoms. And I'll emphasise that. Destroy any colony which shows clinical AFB symptoms. Anything to do with AFB, it's toast. The second they showed AFB was the exact same time when they lost all value to you and became the biggest risk to your operations bottom line. Be that one beehive in your operation, 1,000, 2,000, 8,000, whatever, they became a big distraction from your profit. Get rid of it. And I know this is a really hard one for a lot of beekeepers, especially smaller beekeepers don't rely on bees for their income, but don't try to save the bees. It's not economically viable. Any way you cost it out, it doesn't make dollars or cents. And the most important thing is that by keeping those bees ticking along, it keeps the disease alive. So you have not done anything to reduce your AFB issue. Another thing is do AFB honey culture tests, which is on a well-mixed sample of honey for every load of bees. Like for a load, for a commercial guy, that's every truckload. For a smaller beekeeper, that might be at every apiary. For the person at home, you may not want to do it, but if you want to see how your bees are going, that's your beehive. No, you need to look at these bees and determine which loads need additional work to clean them up, which can be a lot of things. You know, you might, if you got clean bees, but there's a 3+ reading in that load, you might even want to shake all those bees on the new foundation in spring, just to try to clean up what's there lurking in the background. But whatever it is, you've got to work out which loads are dirty, which loads are clean. And the clean ones are really important because the clean loads will propagate your new colonies. Because we all know you only make up new colonies from healthy bees. You do not use AFB infected bees to make up new colonies because you're passing on the disease. So in New South Wales, just south of the border for many of you guys, the EMAI lab requires 75 mils, which is a minimum of 115 grams of clean honey per sample for a honey culture test. If you send less, your culture won't be as accurate, so you've wasted your money. So just add a few more mils. You know, it's not gold, it's honey. So we'll quickly go over to the dark side. Please don't use antibiotics for managing AFB. For some, this is news. For others, we know that it's out there and there are people that use it. But please don't use antibiotics for managing AFB. Yes, initially it masks the signs of infection, so it looks like it was cured. But over time, this disguise enables the infection to be spread further and further throughout the operation by the beekeeper. Brief convenience becomes an ongoing nightmare because you basically made a deal with the devil. OTC doesn't kill AFB spores, and the spores cause the disease. Sure, AFB has got 2 sections, and one of those sections is going to be killed off by OTC, but that's not the bit that causes the disease and will re-cause the disease. All you do is mask the infection for a little while, and then it comes back. Bigger, badder, worse than ever. So please, don't bother with it. Looking on the bright side, you can clean up an operation that was regularly dosed with OTC, and unfortunately some commercial beekeepers have done that. But the fact that you initially took the easy way out means it will be a longer road to recovery. And that's where we put up the ad for the BBOs, Bee Biosecurity Officers, because we can very effectively help you with that journey through all sorts of management plans. So if you have been dabbling in the dark side and you would like to set yourself free and start cleaning yourself up, please contact BBOs in your relevant state and we can start working with you. And even though you might not have heard about it, BBOs in most states work with a lot of commercial beekeepers and help them out. So don't be embarrassed about this because BBOs are out there to help beekeepers, be they small beekeepers, be they large commercial beekeepers. We are regularly helping commercial beekeepers to help improve their operation. So don't be shy. Call our numbers. So let the force be with you, because smart beekeepers understand the science, which is that antibiotics don't kill AFB spores, which cause the infection, and they don't bother with OTC. Some do. Unfortunately, most of them are ignorant. Smart beekeepers understand that an operation without OTC becomes cleaner, because you can see the enemy, which for us is an AFB infected hive, and we can quickly eliminate it. You know, all of us would chop off an infected finger to save an arm and to save ourselves. And that's what AFB is. It's an infection. Get rid of it and you can keep on going. Smart beekeepers also understand that their OTC-free operation is more profitable. It's like, do you really think that packers or consumers want to buy honey which could have antibiotics in it? Of course not. You're a burden to those guys that are buying your honey. They've got to do all sorts of stuff. So make sure that you have nice, clean honey that's worth what you're getting paid for it, and you'll reap the rewards. Smart beekeepers also understand that their OTC-free operation will be more valued to a buyer when you sell up to retire, because we can't go on forever. I know there are a lot of very old beekeepers, but there are also a lot of beekeepers that are smart and they would like to retire and they'd like to sell it to someone that is going to pay what it's worth. If you've got an operation that's full of disease and it's got all sorts of hidden issues, you're not going to pay top dollar for that. But if you've got a nice, clean operation, you can get what you need because it is clean and people can do stuff with it. So be smart about all of this. Look at the long game. So the two main ways in which AFB spreads, as previously mentioned, robber bees bring it back home on their bodies because they've got physical contact with spores inside an infected beehive they're robbing out, or internally because they've ingested honey that they robbed, which is full of AFB spores. And we're talking millions of spores per kilogram in an AFB infected hive. Millions of spores per kilo. The research says maybe 5 million spores are needed to cause AFB. If you've got 5, 10, 15 million spores, it doesn't take many robber bees to bring all that home. And of course, the other way that AFB spreads is through the beekeeper and all that crazy stuff they do that defies the basic rules of bee biosecurity and bee economics, which I know that's going right away from barrier systems and all that sort of stuff, but they are really important things because bee biosecurity and bee economics make your operation tick along and keep its head above water. So, bee biosecurity explained. It refers to measures aimed at preventing the introduction and/or spread of harmful organisms such as viruses and bacteria, etc., in order to minimise the risk of transmission of infectious disease. So, in doing so, bee biosecurity is an essential element of sustainable agriculture development and increased profitability, what we all want. So, I hate to bring this up as a comparison, but the COVID-19 pandemic is a recent example of a threat for which biosecurity measures have been needed in all countries of the world. And with those using barrier systems doing far, far better than those others. And at this point, I pay my respects to anyone affected by COVID. It is horrible, it's real, and we all need to deal with it. So beekeepers not running a barrier system are ignoring the basic rule of bee biosecurity, as they enable, instead of impede, the spread of disease. They negatively impact their own profitability and are a biosecurity threat. That's a biosecurity threat to other nearby bee colonies and bee businesses, which could be you. So people that don't do it properly are a threat to others. They need to lift their game. They have a biosecurity duty, and in certain states, such as New South Wales, Victoria and SA, where the code of practice is a condition of registration, they should be following their biosecurity duty and making sure they are not a biosecurity threat to others. So, basic bee economics explained. The cost of production means the total sum of money required for the production of a specific quantity of output, e.g. honey, nukes, queens, whatever you're doing. The opportunity cost is the value of the best alternative that was not chosen in order to pursue the current endeavour, i.e. what could have been accomplished with the resources expended, such as time and effort of a beekeeper, in the undertaking. It represents opportunities which were foregone, such as lost production from AFB hives, or even worse, selling AFB nukes or hives to others. Sure, you sold that junk to a beekeeper, but your reputation took a major hit, much bigger than the whatever it was you sold that for. What you gained on the swings, you lost in triple on the roundabout. So, unfortunately, beekeepers often don't properly work out their costs of particular work that they undertake. As a result, they often concentrate their efforts on areas that are not of the greatest economic value to their business. So literally they spin their wheels. They're going flat out and they're not moving forward whatsoever. Managing disease properly is one area that many operators neglect and which they don't fully appreciate the economic benefits of doing so properly. A healthy operation means more time to spend on their A game, which is doing their beekeeping stuff, making honey, making nukes, whatever they're making, so that they are going forward. So the main beekeeper infection practices are moving frames of bees, brood or honey between hives, and especially without adequate records for traceback. Sharing equipment, honey supers and other internal components between hives. Using second-hand equipment without sterilising it first, which is pretty risky. And acquiring hives, nukes, colonies that are integrated directly into their apiaries and not quarantined. It's very risky. And allowing bees to access honey, wax cappings, sticky supers, whatever it is, you're allowing bees to rob. So the main beekeeper infection practices, allowing weak and diseased dead hives to exist within their apiaries or lying around the shed that can eventually get robbed out. And this is very risky. So, beekeepers, when they go to an apiary, the first thing they do is pull out their dead outs. You've got it the wrong way. You've got to be preventing those hives from becoming a dead out in the first place. Either it gets down to a critical mass and you pull it out of the apiary and you take it home, or you bring nukes, or you reduce the entrance, whatever it is that you need to do, requeen it, whatever it is you need to do to make sure it doesn't end up being a dead out around your apiary so that other bees can rob it out. And it's a main one that guys just don't get it. They don't realise you've got to prevent these hives from getting like that in the first place. So you need to change the way you approach that problem completely. And trying to save or reuse colonies of bees that have already been infected with AFB. They're high risk because you expose your operation to billions of AFB spores. Lots of work, it's not 100% successful, and you have better things to spend your time on. Let's look at the basic dynamic here. A hive doesn't get AFB until a newly hatched larvae is fed between 6 and 10 AFB spores, which generally requires for a colony in spring to be bringing in millions of AFB spores so that the young ones, which are the most vulnerable, actually get 6 or 10. The young larvae, they get a minuscule percentage of the daily food that the worker bees are producing for all the larvae. Those big fat ones that are just about to be capped, they get most of it. So that happens. You get some that are there. But those 6 to 10 spores might only be in one infected brood cell. When that's finished, that one brood cell will produce up to 2.6 billion, not million, billion, 2,600 million AFB spores. Okay, so when you've got a hive which is lousy with AFB, it's got trillions of AFB spores in it. Why would you want to stuff around with that? Just burn it. Don't even bother irradiating it. Just burn it. Get rid of it. You don't want it. It's a big liability to your operation. But anyway, lots of people want to keep them. And unfortunately, that is the wrong decision. And another one, throwing antibiotics at the problem. It only makes a bigger and more widespread problem. And I'm going to keep talking about that. The code of practice requires beekeepers to regularly check hives for disease, meaning you need to look in the brood box, minimum 2, better 3, 4, 5 times a season. And in Queensland, that can be 12 times a year. I don't care where you are, 12 times a year if you want to. Check frames for disease. Manage your weak hives, like I touched on before. If it's not looking good, do something about it. Don't just say, she'll be right, mate, because that's BS. Bee-proof equipment and premises to stop bees accessing exposed honey. You know, if you're extracting outside, think about the other people around you or the other colonies. If they start to hit your honey, you're the problem. You're not part of the solution, you're the problem. Get out of denial. Look at the code of practice. You've got to bee-proof stuff. Don't let bees hit it. Keep good records. I hear the groans. Oh, I can't keep records. Well, you got to, you know, start keeping them. Got to be able to trace back what happens. You look at the code of practice. Every time you move bees, when you do your spring and autumn brood checks and your mite checks, what's notifiable and non-notifiable diseases did you find? All these things should be kept. I know it's a drag, but we're in 2021. We're not in 1978 when I was 8 years old. Come on, we've got to progress. I don't care if you've been beekeeping for 50 years. You need to follow the current requirements. And also, if you've got 50 or more colonies, that's not 40 production hives, you know, and 20 nukes. That's whatever you've got. If you've got 50 or more colonies of bees, you should be doing biosecurity training. Update your information, because what happened in 1960 might not be relevant now. So the code also recommends the use of a barrier system, which you guys have had to wait, 20 something minutes for me to start talking about. So apart from all that other robbing stuff, you know, the other main actions which through AFB can be spread, generally by you guys, fall into the area which can be managed quite well with a good barrier system. And that's because once you get AFB, it can be really hard to get rid of it. It's easier to get it, harder to get rid of it. So with no barrier system, you can easily spread AFB between multiple sites, making a problem bigger and harder to contain. Whoa, don't know what happened there, but we'll just go back again. So beekeepers who have insufficiently invested in honey boxes, i.e. don't have enough of them per hive, often spread AFB very quickly, as they need to get those boxes, not boxers, extracted and out onto the next site ASAP to get that honey. So think about that one. So the barrier system explained. These are the main types. You've got a single hive barrier where generally no hive components are shared between hives, like a monogamous marriage, basically, unless a hive is being split. I don't know how to equate that one. But anyway, with this system, a colony may still get AFB, but it will be contained within that primary infected colony and not spread to others, which is very thoughtful. Then you've got the load, apiary, pallet, or section barrier system, which is a larger number of hives share equipment. And yeah, be that an entire truckload, which commercials call a load, a smaller apiary, each pallet within an apiary or sections of it, e.g. maybe a load of 120, 144 is split into quarters and only share those boxes. You know, you might have so many pallets per quarter and they get those boxes. When using this barrier, the AFB can only spread within the hives sharing the equipment, so the risk increases as the number of hives involved gets higher. So we can look at some very beautiful pictures from a very good friend of mine. This is a single hive barrier system. As you can see, they're all clearly marked and they're fully traceable through the extraction process and back out on hives. We'll look at some of these hives in close-up later, but you may be able to see that there are actually numbers on that pallet. There are 4 hives on the pallet. Each box also has numbers on it. You could basically train a monkey to put these boxes on the right hives. Then we've got a load barrier. What boxes went where last time? Think of this one. All big fires start from small fires. So all it will take is one hive to get AFB and it starts to spread. You might be keeping those boxes within a load, but they're spreading, they're sharing everything, and they're not always sharing good stuff. And then we look at no barrier, and I can feel a big headache coming on straight away. felt sorry for this guy. I spent some time with him, and in 1 month, he'd pulled out 60 beehives that had to be burned. And whilst he didn't have a problem with that, it was costing him so much money. These were all bees that had come out of his various apiaries with AFB because boxes went absolutely everywhere. So statistics say that the fewer hives that share equipment, the lower the chance that a disease will spread within an apiary. Example is social distancing. Keep away from everyone else, there's less chance you'll get something. So a single hive barrier system is therefore by far the best way to protect your business or beehives against widespread AFB infections and, most importantly, financial loss. Load-based barrier systems are looked at as being faster and easier, but this assumption by the beekeeper does not take into account the extra time, stress, and most importantly, financial costs required to control an infection once you, or should I say your bees, have found it, because they work hard and they will find that stuff. When it's robbing season, they will find it very, very effectively and bring it home. So the other thing is that AFB infection might have occurred a long time before you found it and it spread further. So if you're running a load-based barrier system and you find one hive with AFB, be afraid, be very afraid, because it is probably spread quite a lot further through your apiary than you thought. It's there, and this is going to affect people's sleep because you wake up 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, the zombie hour, before you get up and move your bees, and you're worrying about that AFB. You know, it's really not worth it. So we're going to look at the single hive barrier as an example. You ensure that all frames go back into the same box after extraction, which sounds impossible, but it's actually really, really, really easy. So that means that if a hive has AFB, then its infectious components, which are the box and frames, stay together as just one infectious unit. So if that box goes anywhere, which before the infection is discovered, then it is only going back onto the same already infected hive. So it's easily identifiable and can be collected for radiation, and the reinfection rate by the beekeeper is basically 0, meaning that you have not spread any disease unless you allow it to weaken and be robbed out. So, you know, make sure that you don't let bees get robbed out, and you are really, really minimising your infection of AFB in your own bees and those around you. So look at the load barrier. There's less emphasis by the beekeeper to put all frames back in the same box after extracting. Like, why would you? It's all in the same apiary. It doesn't matter if it's there, here or there or everywhere. And no boxes are individually identified. So, you know, the result of that is that during extraction, one infected box, if it came off a hive with AFB, might be broken into 2 or 3 other infectious units and then just become anonymous and untraceable within that load of bees. You know, there's AFB there, but there's absolutely no way for you as a beekeeper to trace it. It's you know, that person in the community that's currently spreading COVID through Victoria and they can't even find them. You know, a typhoid Mary. And that really does hurt a lot of beekeepers. So when all those boxes go back out onto that load of bees, the chance that AFB can spread to other hives is high. So to eliminate any residual AFB spores within that load of boxes will require all of those boxes to be irradiated, which is a huge cost, you know, $500+ a pallet. That, you know, a lot of pallets of boxes, that costs a lot of money. Do you want to throw that money away? So the reinfection rate from one AFB hive can become quite high, especially if multiple boxes of honey had actually been removed, extracted and put back out on other hives before that hive was even found. You know, all this stuff impacts on your sleep big time. It's not worth it. So if we look at comparisons of AFB control, a single hive barrier is basically a laser-guided precision bombing operation on an identified and located target. The target is contained, eliminated, and the threat fully removed with no additional casualties. So that is basically the best result that you want. We go to look at a load barrier. It's a carpet bombing exercise based on pretty sketchy second-hand intelligence, and you're not even sure where exactly the target is and if you're actually bombing the right area. So a lot of expense will be incurred and your chances of success are questionable. It's like you're throwing away money. So your accountant, bank manager, and probably your psychiatrist will strongly advise you to use a single hive barrier, as it makes a whole lot more sense and dollars. It's you playing the short, middle, and long-term game where your clean and highly profitable business is worth heaps more than a dirty operation when you go to sell up and retire. Think about that. You know, a little bit of extra work now could make you a whole lot more down the track. So we'll have a real quick look here. We've got the good, which is single hive barrier. You had a hive in the operation, you pull boxes out, you extracted, you put everything back out, and after a long time, that one hive died. All you need to do is irradiate 4 boxes and restock a hive. Let's look at the not quite as good, a load barrier. All this stuff is contained within one load of bees, but look at that end result. You have potentially infected so many more hives before that first one even died out. And then the ugly, it's all happening, but it's happening through 3 loads of bees, 4 loads of bees, 5 loads of bees. So you're just making the problem so big that some people have had mental breakdowns trying to deal with the fact of their AFB infection, which could have come from just one hive. Think about that. Beekeeping is really, really hard. The last thing we need is for this disease to be stuffing with our heads. And look at it down the track. Look at that infection rate. That's ridiculous. We've got loads and loads of bees. If you look at those blue ones, they are colonies that, they're ready to go. Black ones have already been replaced. All that work to replace colonies that have died from an infection. Sure, you might spend a little bit more time on a single hive barrier system at the front of it, but at the back of it, you don't need to be producing all those extra colonies of bees to replace the dead outs. What you lost on the swings, you regained 3 times on your roundabout. You look at it, go slowly, we're in a hurry. That's what Napoleon said. And he did pretty good until he got to Russia. So give it a go. It's never too late to start or restart your single hive barrier system. So just start by clearly identifying all hives and boxes currently on them. So we've got 3 different operations here. The one on the left runs more than 2,000 hives as single hive barriers. The guy in the middle with the really pretty hives, he runs over 1,000. And then we've got cattle tags on the right here, and he runs a lot of bees too. There are lots of different ways you can identify your hives. And, you can start with a marker pen and work up from that when you get the time. Irradiate the rest of your used honey boxes, or you can risk it. How lucky do you feel? Have I fired 5 shots or 6, sucker? That's the way it is. Think about it. At the end of the day, it's your sleep and sanity that matter the most. So mark up those boxes, hopefully irradiated, before or after you place them on your hives. So I've got 2 examples. We've got the pink load on the left. And again, we've got the red load or the pinkish load on the right, where each hive is a single hive barrier. The guy on the left is a load base. On the right is a single hive barrier. But at the end of the day, as hives get AFB, you simply pull them out and irradiate them, which is a lot easier with the single hive barrier system on the right. It's pretty cheap. It's easy to do. It's that laser guided stuff. So irradiate. And you guys should all be saying I obey. So irradiate all that extra stuff, clear your conscience of all that excess baggage and start afresh. So you can modify or organise your extracting operations. Now, the extracting line is basically one long conveyor belt. So think of it that way. I was shown this by that same fellow who's got a nickname which is a bit like a dog. It's all just one long conveyor belt. And before that, I didn't realise it, but it is. You know, they extract hundreds of boxes of honey a day and everything goes back into the box that it came from, which I could not believe. But this is how it is. It's one long conveyor belt. There it is, all going in, all sorted out. It's all in order, and it's actually really, really simple. You know, and the basic thing is the same number of frames are in each honey box. Add one if the number is down. So if your uncapper gets hungry and it chews up a frame, easy. Put a foundo in, extract the foundo. It doesn't matter, just keep the number of frames the same. 8 or 9 in a honey box or whatever you run normally. If a box comes in with 7 and it should have 9, we'll chuck 2 empties in. It's easy. And then, you know, look at the boxes. They're uncapped and reloaded in order. We've got a nice little frame there. As you can see, they started with an anonymous box, and then they had 41, whatever that one is, 39, 38, 37, 36, 35, 34, 33, 32, 31. So they're very organised chaps. So everything's in an order because they probably even put the empties out in order, and they put the honey back on the pallet in order out in the field. So they're very organised. And then when it comes time putting everything back in, it's all in order. This is double-sided frame here for when stuff comes out of the extractor. It's all in order. Everything has stayed the same. You know, so just set up your extractor for a consistent operation. So clearly mark the first space inside your extractor where you will always start loading and unloading uncapped frames. Always be consistent. In rotary extractors, you may want to number every frame slot or every section between the framework, depending on how it's built. In horizontal extractors with 3 or 4 banks, you mark number 1, then the second bank that normally gets loaded next, and then the rest in order of loading. So it all depends. How are you going to do it? Clockwise, anti-clockwise, towards you, backwards. Work that out. In a 4-bank extractor, position 2 is often the one directly opposite to 1, as once you fill that first bank up, that weight of frames pulls it directly down and you end up with the opposite one. Anyway, there's more than one way to skin a cat. You'll work it out. But all you have to do is keep loading and unloading in the same order every time, and you'll pull the frames back into the same box that they came out of. It's easy. So organise is easy. Look here, here's my little 39 frame extractor. I've got number 1, I just used marker pen. There we are. I don't stuff anything up. And you look at the operation we looked at before, you can see up the top there, you've got bank 2, you've got bank 4, you've got everything in order. It's all worked out. We can do it. Keep it simple, stupid. We're all beekeepers. Don't make it too complicated. So give it a go. Ensure each hive has enough of its own dedicated honey boxes so that you don't need to share equipment, except if you split a hive. This also ensures your operation is on top of its potential honey production each year, as you have the wood, as in boxes, and you're not waiting around on extraction to make more boxes available. It really does make it easier for you. You also make the most out of that once in a blue moon big honey flow that makes your season and carries you through others that come. And that's how the smart guys do it. You know, if you take out one marked box per hive but need some more, you know, because normally when you go out, you take one new box for each hive. But if you need extras, just take out an extra pallet of boxes with foundation or radiated equipment, and they can go wherever you have that massive hive that needs the extra box. Because basically, the first box of honey pays for that box. You know, look at the business side of things. And for those hives that don't need a box, then go straight down and check the brood out. If it's clean, then you could add that box on another hive. If there's an issue, you'll deal with it. If it's AFB, it's toast. So give it a go. You know, you've got to look at minimising your risks, but by using good records, you can afford to take some small risks when required, etc. Using box or brood frames in another hive. Just keep the records and you can do all this stuff because you can follow up later if you made a mistake. And if you're in New South Wales and you want some help, then please contact me. If you're in another state, please contact your BBO, and if they have questions they can't answer, we'll be in touch. So whatever it is, you know, please don't be shy, and you know, give it a go. So thank you very much for that. I'm trying to unshare everything, and yeah, we'll go from there if there are questions.
Thanks so much, Rod. That's really interesting. You've given us a heap of really good hints for our beekeepers out there about how to really run a good system. While we're waiting for people to fill in their questions and ask their questions, I've got one to start off, and that is you've talked a lot about making sure we don't mix up the frames with the boxes. Where are some of the other contamination sites that you might find that beekeepers, particularly some of our smaller beekeepers, might end up mixing stuff between hives?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting one because when we start with one beehive, it's awesome, and we get a hit, and we want to get more. And so, you know, beekeepers either buy another nuke from someone else, or they might split their own beehive, or something like that. But often there's a lot of sharing that goes on in the early stages, and either you're lucky or you're not lucky. I was lucky when I started in North Queensland. When I got back to Australia, I didn't pick up any AFB, but other people, their first hive has AFB, and then everything they make from it has AFB, and unfortunately they have to depopulate and start again. So it's really hard, you know. For some people, it is, you know, they feel so bad when all their hives get diseased. But yeah, as a guy that had 60 beehives that he had to destroy told me, he said it's not that cute potty calf with the big watery eyes. At the end of the day, they are insects. So think about that. You can always get more bees. I know it's a really tough decision for some people, but when you're looking at the bigger picture, which is disease, sometimes you just got to get rid of those bees and start again, because there are people out there with clean bees. So, you know, there are lots and lots of things that cause AFB, people feeding out their cappings, or other beekeepers nearby putting their cappings or stickies out for bees to clean up because the bees seem to love it so much. All those sort of things, which under the code of practice are not good. Unfortunately, other people do those. So, you know, the bees get out and find this stuff. It's a hard one.
Thanks, Rod.
If I may.
Sorry, Hamish?
Oh, Rebecca, if I may, Rod, you'll probably endorse this one as well. Often the whole good work can become undone if you're stacking stickies on top of each other, and perhaps if you haven't been as diligent and done your inspections. We found advising to put some newspaper in between the sticky supers to catch any drips so they're not dripping into the next box could be another thing to add to you know, your practices.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one, and especially in the early days when you're still cleaning up an operation, if you're a larger beekeeper, especially. And again, with AFB, it all comes down to dilution is the solution, and that is that a certain number of spores will be required to start the infection. Sometimes that is small, but generally it's a large number. Like with a robbing event, it's a lot of bees. But yeah, it does come up at times, and like even, you know, drifting bees can cause AFB infections to occur, but you always try to keep it as low as possible. So even further newspaper, I know some people that use like builder's plastic and stuff between the boxes because there's absolutely no permeability or anything. But again, the better you can extract those boxes, the better that you are minimising your AFB risk. So, like a lot of commercial guys have the luxury of warm rooms. They'll get the boxes of honey back up to the temperature of the beehive in the mid-30s, and when they extract out, you get most of the honey. Or you might be someone from my area of New South Wales that's extracting cold honey at the moment, and the stuff comes out like mud, and there's still a lot left. You need to look at that, but yeah, there's a lot of issues there, and when you do a honey culture test, you could often have many spores in the honey, but you won't have any hives with AFB. So it's a gradual build up of spores in the hive that will cause AFB to occur, but every step you can take to minimise the risk is a good one.
Thanks, Rod. We've got another question come in here asking about wax dipping. Is wax dipping better at preventing AFB compared to painting? And can you irradiate wax dipped boxes?
Okay, so the rule with in New South Wales, you either irradiate, burn, or wax dip boxes to clear it of AFB, and that's 150 degrees Celsius minimum for a minimum of 10 minutes. So it's not 150 for 2 minutes, not 150 degrees Celsius for 5 minutes. It is a minimum of 150 degrees for 10 minutes. Will kill AFB spores, which starts to show you just how hardy these guys are. So like some people boil wax and I think that cleans it up. AFB spores are laughing at you when you just boil it. So temperature is really important, but hot wax dipping can be a good way to decontaminate boxes from AFB. Remember your safe work method statements. This wax at 150, 160, a lot of guys are up at 170 degrees. It's highly volatile and it will burn your skin in no time. Make sure you're prepared. A lot of people, it's a lot easier to radiate because you can also save the frames. All those extracted frames can go through the radiation process without any change to their condition whatsoever and go straight out onto another beehive. And that can often be very economically important, especially to commercial beekeepers. So generally, most of the commercials that are going flat out, they irradiate instead of hot wax dipping. Painting a box to try and cover up AFB. No, in New South Wales, that's not acceptable. I can't say for Queensland, but in New South Wales, that's not an acceptable method for decontaminating for AFB.
And it's not in Queensland either, so it's not, and it really isn't going to be effective down the line at all. So we definitely recommend against that one. Another question here for you. So if someone is starting from scratch, should they ask that the nuke comes certified AFB free, or should they immediately send a sample for testing and build from there? What's the best strategy for someone starting new?
Okay, stop worrying about AFB so much is the #1 rule. It's the luck of the draw. You're better off to go for a nuke provider that might charge a bit more but has more records, traceability, they're offering a better quality product than going for the cheap option, because sometimes a cheap option is just cheap and nasty, and see how things go down the track. So stop worrying about AFB initially, get the hive going, and then you can start doing brood inspections and see what happens.
And I've got another quick question for you, Rod. A lot of beekeepers think about some of the, big components that they might move between their barrier system, but I always try and tell them, think about those small things you might have overlooked as well. Things like if you wear gloves or if you use tools, can you think of other things like that beekeepers need to kind of keep in mind, that those objects could also be moving that AFB between hives?
Yeah, like a lot of things like hive tools, gloves, smokers are low risk, but they're not no risk. So, cleanliness is next to godliness, apparently. So try to clean things regularly so that you don't have issues that may cause a risk. And a lot of these things are probably going to be in your head, not necessarily actually happen, but they are things you do need to think about.
Yeah, and I know a lot of beekeepers, particularly if they only got 1 or 2 hives, are usually fairly careful once they understand the risk associated. We have
Yep.
another one
Hey,
here that
I just need to quickly run off. I'll be back in a minute. Excuse
Okay.
me, I'll be back shortly.
I'm going to throw this question over to Hamish. Hamish, this question is about stopping the spread inside the extractor. Got any tips on how we might stop AFB spreading within our extracting equipment?
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. I think with this one, a bit of foreknowledge is best. If you are extracting any suspicious supers or ones that you know have got AFB, keep them separately and do them as a separate batch, perhaps at the end or something like that. Generally, if you're extracting normally, the spore load perhaps won't be as high on the bits that are touching the frames. So hopefully the spore load, if there was an infected one, is quite minimal and not enough to instigate the disease. But you know, again, what Rod said, cleanliness as well, washing down between loads, between extracting efforts, those sorts of things help. And also, if you are able to sample your honey for your honey sampling, to do that intermittently to get your bulk sample at the end. So it's not foolproof, but any efforts you make is going to reduce the chances, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing for beekeepers to keep in mind. We can tell you the best way to minimise your risk, but with any kind of disease, it's difficult to prevent it entirely. You can really just do the best you can and make it as safe as you possibly can. So I might just also throw that over to you, Rod, if you want to make a comment about stopping the spread inside extractors.
Yeah, okay. So now I talked to Dr. Michael Hornitsky, who I call Dr./Professor AFB, and he's done a lot of work on AFB. And he said that inside an extracting operation, you will only have a risk of spreading AFB if you had very heavily infected equipment. So again, you know, there's always a potential risk, but you know, a lot of beekeepers have a big and a small extractor. The small extractor is normally for the equipment that has AFB. For some guys, maybe it should be for their clean hives, and they use a big one for their AFB. But generally speaking, the small extractor they use exclusively for hives that they've identified as AFB hives. But if you look at all the contact points inside an extractor, they vary, but generally speaking, most the frames sit on rails where, you know, you've got a very small section of the end bar which probably hasn't got much AFB spores on it compared to the framework and all that stuff. So a lot of the times the actual contact points that may have AFB, which could be transmitted to the next hives, are low, and they're not going to be very accessible to bees. So a lot of it often falls into that dilution is the solution aspect of it, because you can dodge bullets with AFB depending on what brood work you do and what other stuff you do to bees that stop them from ever getting to the stage where AFB actually breaks out. It could be like in a honeyculture test, they could be 1+ results, but they never get any further. You never get AFB. So what I always say is, if you know that a hive has AFB, all that gear, all those boxes, they get extracted last. And just to be safe, after that, you give your extracting operation good clean out. because even just cold water washing off honey and wax, and remember, when you're washing wax off stainless steel and stuff, use cold water. Don't use hot water, because hot water will melt that wax, and that wax will then spread on the metal. Always use cold water first, give it a good clean up. That will get rid of most of that. So you have completely diluted your risk. You've got it down to a stage where you're very unlikely that you'll actually spread any AFB.
Thanks. And I think we've probably got time for just one more question. And this one's from Martin. He's asking what the best way to clean down hive tools and bee brushes is. Do you oil them? Do you wipe them? Do you use metho?
Okay, so bee brush is really easy. Give it a good wash in water. You've got rid of most of the stuff. Sure, if you were to go microscopically, you might find a few AFB spores. But think of it this way: you use a bee brush normally on capped honey. You brush a few bees off. They'll come off pretty easy, and they might get a few spores on them, which is it's nothing in the scheme of things. When it comes to hive tools, like when I work on a compliance operation, because they often invite me to go along as an observer, before every apiary gets inspected, they thoroughly clean what are already very clean hive tools. So they give them a wash, they give them a flame, and then they clean them up and they use them. And then they will often do that between hives. I don't actually generally clean my hive tool between hives unless something comes along, and then I'll chuck that hive tool in the ute and get a new one out if I'm concerned. But generally speaking, just washing a hive tool in soapy water, maybe with some Pino Clean or something in it. Get another hive tool or a little brush or a butter knife to clean off all the propolis and wax and clean off the honey. You know, that's as good as you need to get, because you're not really going to spread AFB with a reasonably well cleaned hive tool.
Thanks, Rod. And I think you're right. You know, it's up to the beekeeper to use a bit of common sense too about thinking about how much risk they've taken, how much has really got onto whatever it is that they're moving between different hives. So I think we've kind of run out of time. We've got a couple of other questions there, but I've responded to them, and if they can send me a quick email, and I will get back to them in person about a little bit more detail around AFB, because it's a bit of a complex disease, and so we don't have time to quite get into everything tonight. I just want to correct something I said earlier. It's at Beanley School that the field day for the bee conference will be on Saturday. So check out the QBA website, which has lots of details about that. And I just want to thank you so much, Rod, for your fantastic talk tonight. I think you've covered all the bases in terms of keeping beekeepers safe from AFB, and keep in mind too that it's not just AFB that you're preventing when you have a good barrier system in place. It's all those other diseases as well, and pests that you're not spreading between your hives. So please take on a lot of what, you know, those things that Rod has talked about tonight, because it will improve your beekeeping, whether you've got a small operation or a big one, significantly. So thanks so much, Rod, and we'll see everyone on the 13th of July, hopefully, if not before then.
Bye-bye.